The president, it's his nature and it's his commitment to the American people to work across the aisle. That's not going to stop, even if some people are cynical about it.
The problems aren't just inside that chamber, though. The president also facing a skeptical public. A majority don't think they're better off since he took office. A majority don't approve of the job he's doing.
Well, listen, there's no question, and again, the president spoke about this, and it's on his mind every day. People are still hurting in America. As he started his presentation last night, talking about the fact that we've come out of an historic pandemic, the economic crisis that resulted, supply chain crisis that resulted. You look at the cost of milk and eggs, it's about $4.25, I think, on average in the country. So, yeah, people are still hurting, and we still have work to do. I think the president was clear that the job is not done. We brought down the cost of insulin for seniors to $35 a month. We're bringing down the cost of medication on an annual basis for seniors so that they'll be capped at about $2,000 a year. We're dealing with what we need to do to bring down the cost of energy in terms of rebates. So a lot of good work has happened, but more work needs to be done. There's no doubt about that.
That was Vice President Kamala Harris in a one-on-one interview with Good Morning America's George Stephanopoulos. Briahna, this seems to be Harris's first high-level media interview in a while. How do you think she handled herself?
Look, I think she was fine. And I think that strategically it makes sense to send her out to the public after Biden has basically achieved a slam dunk in the State of the Union address. There's very little to beat up on her for. She can kind of ride his coattails of victory, get her a little exposure, push back against some of the reporting that she's being hidden, that even people in her own camp are disapproving of her. I believe we talked recently about that profile that came out where apparently Kamala's team gave the journalists some contacts who they should reach out to give like a complimentary view of Kamala's performance. And even the folks that she picked that were supposed to feed the reporter a complimentary view,
they didn't.
Were like, nah, I don't know about Kamala Harris. So, she's been going through it recently, and I think this was a smart move to just let her get out there in an uncontroversial context, show her face, and remind people that she exists and that she is capable of saying a few sentences in a row without it being gaffe-worthy.
Which doesn't seem like it would be so hard, but she has struggled with it in the past.
I mean, look, in all fairness, the position of the vice president is not the easiest. They're often tasked with nothing or tasked with the ugly, hard things that nobody else wants to deal with. Giving her the border.
Like declaring that your president actually won the election. Mike Pence, given the most horrendous task of any vice president ever.
Right.
Declare I'm the winner.
He's not signing up for round two, Yeah. So look, I feel like the border policy, giving her that was difficult. Could she handle it better? Yes. Do I think that she's the kind of person who seems like she's not especially interested in politics, that she doesn't necessarily read her binders in that kind of Trumpian way, that maybe she's not the most prepared for things or the most knowledgeable? Yes, and yes. But, she can do some morning shows. She acquitted herself well, and that's basically all she needs to do if Biden keeps landing these kinds of punches like he did last night.
Well, here's a little bit more of that interview. Let's play it.
Governor Sanders also made a point about the generational gulf. She's 40. President Biden just turned 80. Looks like he's gearing up for re-election, but a majority of Democrats, according to our new poll, say they don't want President Biden to run again. What do you say to them?
I mean, George, I think that age is more than a chronological fact, to be very frank with you. It's about thinking about whether we have in our leader, which we do in Joe Biden, somebody who is bold. I mean, think about it. What he has achieved in this presidency only 2 years in is historic in terms of the investment in infrastructure. We're going to remove lead from the pipes of America within the next 9 years. Children for generations and their families have been suffering because of the lead poisoning. We're going to lay and make sure that people have broadband across our country, where we saw families that were driving up to the McDonald's to have access to the public Wi-Fi, and what that did in terms of creating educational gaps for people who should be able to have full capacity. So I think that what people want to know is, what have you done? And when you look at what President Biden has achieved, what our administration has achieved, not to mention foreign policy, something you care deeply about and have worked on, I think you will see that we have a very bold and vibrant president in Joe Biden.
She brings up foreign policy there, which was actually a very light foreign policy speech. That wasn't talked about a lot, the State of the Union, which maybe is a good move for him. I mean, I think Americans do care a lot about the domestic reality, the price of eggs, et cetera. So Sarah Huckabee Sanders hit Biden for not talking more about China, Russia, et cetera.
The balloon in particular. I thought it was weakened by making it about the balloon, which I feel like no one's going to even be thinking about a week from now.
That said, Americans, I think, have a lot of questions about the Biden foreign policy, especially with respect to our ongoing commitment to fund unlimited resources in Ukraine.
The Ukrainian ambassador was at the speech and stood up for applause, and he did reaffirm our commitments there. We'll see what the public thinks of that.
Yeah, I think the public has a lot of questions about how long this is going to go on, whether it's worth it. I know the Republican base is increasingly animated by this. I suspect it's not just the Republican base and that this is not a winning issue for Biden. I think he does. It's been a confused foreign policy because he pulled out of Afghanistan, committed to doing that, followed through on promises that his two predecessors had made, which was maybe signaling a more non-interventionist philosophy, but then it's been very much out of the interventionist playbook with respect to Europe. Yeah.
Are you just swapping one war for another, or do you have real commitments? I also think it was smart of Kamala Harris to talk about those particular domestic issues. I know that sometimes folks in the Beltway, people doing our pundit thing, aren't necessarily as attuned to how salient issues like not having broadband are for an enormous number of people in this country. I know that it was something that came up again and again when we were on I was on the campaign trail with Bernie. This pattern of people literally having to go to public places like McDonald's that have Wi-Fi or public libraries and sit in their cars so their kids can do homework. It's a real thing, and I think it's wise for them not to only be playing to the Beltway in these kinds of remarks.
Well, Harris responded to critics who have doubted whether or not she'll be on President Biden's ticket if he decides to run again in 2024, which he will. Let's watch that.
Joe Biden supporters said he had a great night, that he was on. He was firing on all cylinders. It's being described as a soft launch for the presidential campaign, which leads me to you, because I want to know how you're feeling. Your supporters are saying you personally are taking a lot of incoming. Will she be on the ticket? Will she not be on the ticket? She seems to be in a damned if she does, damned if she doesn't situation. How are you feeling about the job these days that you're doing and people's perception of you on the ticket?
Well, let me first of all say, as the president has said, he intends to run, and if he does, I'll be running with him. As it relates to the work of being vice president, listen, I love the American people. Today, for example, I'm going to be traveling to Atlanta, Georgia, to meet with a bunch of college students about the work we're doing on the climate crisis. We are doing, again, historic work that's about creating jobs, but also investing in a clean energy economy. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in Minnesota. Yesterday, I convened a bunch of foreign policy experts around an upcoming trip, my second trip to Munich, Germany, to speak on behalf of the American people at the Munich Security Conference. There's important good work that's happening, and I take the job very seriously, and I'm honored to serve.
That's what she's supposed to say, and she said it.
And she'll be on the ticket because he can't deal with the headache of trying to replace her. And replace her with who?
Well, also, she's not that bad. As much as, it's fun to poke fun at her weird rambling sentences and stuff, Biden was also known as Joe Gaff Biden. It's nothing new to have a slightly embarrassing vice president. So, she hasn't done anything that really warrants stripping her off the ticket. She served her purpose. She made the ticket diverse. She's a youthful person who's sitting there in case something cataclysmic happens with Joe Biden's health. And I
know you and the rest of the people on the left would be just thrilled to see him swap her out and upgrade Secretary Mayor Pete to the vice presidency.
Honestly, I would be offended on her behalf because as much as her politics are not my own, Mayor Pete's are antithetical to mine in a way that is much more sinister and purposeful, whereas I think Kamala Harris just hangs out with the wrong crowd. If we had gotten our claws into her earlier, she could have been a real contender, a real woke socialist contender.
You heard it here first. More Rising right after this. Stay with us.